There is a voice that shows up right when you're about ready to change your life, right when you are about to embody a new identity, to become a different person, to do something new, to become bigger and expand, to be better. There is a voice that comes, and it does not yell, but rather it questions and it challenges. Are you sure this is going to work? Are you really sure that's who you are? Do you really think you're ready? And most people, if they're unconscious, they just identify that voice as themselves. And oftentimes they then believe that lie and that challenge as truth, and then they just go back into being who they are, and they wonder why they struggle with changing their life. But historically, that voice has been described in a very specific way as the accuser. And what the accuser actually is, when you study the Hebrew traditions or the esoteric teachings of Kabbalah, in the Hebrew Bible, the word Satan was not originally just Satan, and it isn't originally a name. In the original Hebrew, the word is Ha-Satan, and it's a military position, and it means adversary, accuser, and challenger. You see it in texts like Job or Zechariah. The figure is not outside of God, opposing him, but rather part of a system. And a couple months ago, I actually had a conversation with some students, and they were kind of confused. They're like, well, if God is omni and God is all, then nothing exists outside of God. But if God can't look upon the face of evil, then how is Satan a part of God? And how can Satan be in the face of God in the book of Job? And they were kind of really confused, jumping over these fundy hoops, because they were trying to understand spiritual texts through theology, as most modern day Christians do, because we have built so much theology and religion around the spiritual text that we have completely distorted the texts. But Satan is not evil. Okay, Satan is a neutral military position, ultimately meant to push you back towards source. And Satan is a part of God, not separate from God, and that's why God can look upon Satan when you read the stories and allegorical stories like the book of Job. Ha-Satan's role and job is to test, to challenge, and to expose what is not stable. So at its root, the accuser is not evil. It is about testing integrity, about seeing if you're who you actually say you are. And then in the Kabbalah tradition, okay, if you say you want a good gift, because God is just the giver of good gifts, just this abundant, perfect love that just pours down and gives and gives and gives, and we want it to be like God, so we gave back, and that's when the basin kind of broke. We became consciously aware. And so with their tradition, Ha-Satan, again, is not even evil in their tradition. In the Kabbalah, Ha-Satan's job is ultimately to push you towards God. Okay, so they don't care if you deem him as evil or the bad guy with a little pitchfork and red suit hopping around tempting your marriage. No. Okay, it's just the accuser and challenger inside of you when you're trying to become somebody new and put online a new identity psychologically. So picture a soccer field. If you are saying you want this good gift, this is who I want to be, okay? You're a vessel. But in order to receive that good gift and it not hurt you, you need to become a good steward and somebody who's able to embody that gift. So if you want $1 million, you have to become the person who is able to manage $1 million. Because let's say this is you, okay? And this can only hold $100,000. If $1 million were trying to fit into this vessel, it would burst the vessel. So the same with you. So Ha-Satan's job is to see and challenge you as you're given that new identity, as you're embodying that new state of being. So if you're the soccer player with the ball trying to get down the field into the goal to get the blessing, Ha-Satan is the defender. Are you sure you got what it takes? Are you sure that's who you are? And it's going to put that friction to then see if you're worthy. It's going to challenge you. And you even see that in the New Testament when you study the book of, let's say, Matthew. As soon as Jesus is given his identity in chapter 3, if you have your Bibles, feel free to turn there. If not, I'm going to just read it to you, saying, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." Because if you understand baptism and the esoteric symbolism of baptism, you'll understand that he submerges his body, the earth, into the water, okay? To the truth to be cleansed. Come up, take no thought, fire purifies, and now the other comes down, the Spirit. And this is my Son. The new identity is coming on board. Be led by the Spirit. And so then in chapter 4, Jesus is being led by the Spirit into the wilderness. Because once you get this new identity, once you're creating this new identity, once you're leaving the old identity, you even see it with, let's say, the Israelites in Egypt with the Pharaoh and the ego, you're leaving this old identity. You have to go through this wilderness, this place of confusion, the in-between of who you once were and who you will be. Okay, this process of becoming to then get into the promised land. So even Jesus now is going to be tested. That identity that he has received has to be fully integrated into his subconscious, into his psyche, and he has to have it fully come on board. So it's going to be challenged and tested to see if he stays in alignment, his new identity of who he's now saying he is. And so you do. In the Gospels, Jesus is led into the wilderness, and he encounters, in the Greek, it's diabolos, the accuser, also known as Satan. Okay, but what happens here again is not random, it is structured. It is a series of challenges, and each one is aimed at the same thing, identity. It always goes back to identity. Know thyself. And so at that moment of clarity, after baptism, he goes into the wilderness and he's confronted with these three challenges. The first, if you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. The second, throw yourself down and prove that God will catch you. And the third is all of this can be yours if you bow. And every single one begins with a question. If you are, not just do something, but are you really who you think you are? Is your identity who you say you are? And then this accuser, this challenger inside of you then wants you to try to prove, to rest in your ego, to get the dopamine without the integration. And what this scene is doing, and even historically scholars, they understand this moment as a testing of identity and mission, is what kind of person will he be? Will he act from survival? Will he perform for validation? Will he take power without alignment? Or will he stay grounded in who he is becoming and who he says he is? And this isn't just about resisting temptation. This is about defining identity under pressure. And even in early rabbinic thought, you see ideas like the yester hara, the eternal inclination that pulls a person towards self-centered choice. So within the tradition itself, there's already this understanding that the adversary operates as an inner challenge. And that's why people end up self-sabotaging, because they accept the challenge, they accept these accusations as truth, and then they go back to what's familiar. Because the brain is wired for survival, not expansion. When you understand neuroscience and you understand how psychology works, you realize that your brain and your nervous system's job is to keep you alive. So it's not that you're incapable, it's just unfamiliar. And your brain has learned to identify as change as something that's bad. And that is the psychological parallel, because when you look at this through psychology, what we call the accuser, Hasatan, in these scriptures and stories, it shows up as the inner critic, fear-based thought patterns, and resistance to change. So when you try to step into something new, or you try to become somebody new, or you try to take a risk or do something you haven't done before and become a different version of yourself, your mind produces thoughts like, are you sure that's who we are? I don't think that's who we are. Stay where it's safe. This might fail. You're not that person. Not because your mind is evil and not because there's a devil whispering in your ear. It's because it's trying to keep you stable. So that's where you have to learn to regulate your chariot. When you understand esoteric texts, you have to learn to command this. And when you get the new belief systems and you get the new body of emotions that are regulating, now the new identity is coming on board, it will be tested. Because the accuser doesn't show up when you're saying the same. When you're just acting like the same person every day, it's not going to show up because you're in autopilot, you're what's familiar, what's real. It shows up when you're changing. When you're stepping into something new and when your identity is being reshaped and reborn. And whether you understand it through scripture, through mysticism, through esoteric teachings, neuroscience, or psychology, the pattern is consistent. You will be challenged at the level of your identity. Not to destroy you, but to reveal what you actually believe about yourself. And that is why Jesus also says, by your faith, your identity be it unto you. And even the Gita basically says something nearly identical. It's in chapter 17, verse 3. It says that a person's faith is shaped by their inner nature, and that one becomes what their faith is. So whatever you're believing to be true and that you fully embody, that is what you become. Your core essence dictates your convictions and your actions and your beliefs. They reveal your true character. And that is where the challenging happens inside, this questioning, this examining, this refinement process to then go on to perfection. But the moment that you start meditating, meditation is supposed to get you into the present moment to start to actually examine what's going on up here. Okay, and I've said it before, the Buddha talks about this as emptying the mind. You're supposed to separate yourself from your thoughts and your emotions because that's when it gets a lot easier. Because when you are unconscious, you unconsciously then identify with your thoughts and your emotions. So when that accuser comes up, When that Hasatan comes up and it says, oh, all right, I don't think we're ready for this. You're like, yeah, I don't think we're ready for this. You're absolutely right. Like my brain, like that's who I am. I'm identifying with my brain rather than realizing it. It's just a tool that has been programmed based on what belief systems you have put into it the past however many years you've been alive. So then when you meditate, you start separating yourself and you start realizing that you are the soul. Okay, you are the monad, you are the son of man, you are consciousness, you are Christ, whatever terminology you want to use, okay? And you start realizing, oh, these thoughts I think that come up, that my brain's giving me, isn't necessarily the truth. It just wants me to think it's the truth. These feelings that I'm feeling, they're indicators that maybe my body is feeling uncomfortable right now with this new amount of money, with this new level of visibility, with this new promotion, whatever it is, but that doesn't make it wrong. I have to let it experience a new experience to then actually embody that experience and show that it's safe. And so with meditation, you start to really become aware of what's going on in your mind. And the more you practice becoming conscious and aware, the more you practice mindfulness and realizing that you are not your thoughts that you think and you are not the feelings that you feel, that they are not always the truth, okay? They might just be lies trying to be told to you as the truth. They might just be doubt and accusing and challenges coming towards you to see if you're going to go back to what's familiar or if you're going to continue to step out in faith and a new identity and walk in that. And the more that you practice this, the more and easier it gets to then take those thoughts captive by Christ. As Paul says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, take every thought captive. By Christ in you, your hope of glory. Christ is inside of you. The second coming of Christ is realizing that you are not separate from your divinity and that all power has been given unto you from heaven and earth. So when you understand this and you start practicing and when you get to know thyself, because all these traditions at their roots, it's know thyself, because as above, so below, as within, so without, you then are able to catch those thoughts a lot quicker. So I know for me personally, the more conscious I become, the more conscious and aware I expand in my personal growth and my personal journey, the quicker I am to catching those thoughts and the quicker I am to shutting down that challenger and accuser that naturally rises. And so for me, back in the day, I let it run my life. I let it steal, kill, and destroy my future. I let it just run me rampant in emotions. But now, as soon as I step into something new, I'm ready. I'm ready for that accuser. It comes up. It's like, oh, are you sure about that? I'm like, yep, I'm absolutely 100% positive. Thank you. You can go take this and store it in as new information because this is who we are now. And so again, the more you practice it, the stronger your identity becomes, the stronger confidence. And it does. It becomes a lot easier to shut down those thoughts and to take them captive and to say, nope, we're not entertaining that. Because a man who can control his mind is a man who controls his reality. Somebody who can control their mind is not then affected by outer circumstances, is not leaking their power, is not hemorrhaging their energy, is not giving away their authority. They are in complete control and authority. They are in complete alignment with the Father up above, with source and life itself, and they know who they are. And they don't sell their soul for anything because they know why they're here. They step in that identity and they walk in it in full confidence.